For the next hour, we're going to talk about the SharePoint Developer Community, which is also AKMS SharePoint PnP. There are historical things why we ended up with that name, and I'm going to slightly touch that today as well. This is kind of a, how would I put it, this quite typical session, what we do in Ignite or in Builds or in SPC, but we always tend to try to get some additional new content there and new demos as well. If you've been in any of the previous deliveries of exactly the same session, the structure will be relatively the same as well. If you're not familiar with SharePoint PnP, I think this is a good session to really understand what do we do with the open source community and how you can contribute in this one as well, and what's the value of the community and being up to date on it as well. We will have quite a few demos today, so quick demos. Rather try to spark an idea in your head than truly try to teach you something, because that's more important in these conferences. The teaching is something which you can do by yourself by reading documentation, blog posts, and videos and all of that. So sparking an idea is much more important. Now, my name is Vesa Juvonen. I'm a principal program manager from the OneDrive SharePoint development platform team. So my team is responsible of SharePoint framework, CSAM, APIs, farm solutions, feature XMLs, SharePoint add-ins, and so on. Personally, I'm responsible of all of the documentation, guidance, samples, open source projects, and all of that, what's happening together with community. And we've been having this massively active community within the SharePoint development for quite a long time. And I'm going to talk about slightly on the historical things on that as well. Might be a recap for some of you, but I try to spin a new perspective and additional information there as well. Now, a few kind of a typical slides. So what is a SharePoint Patterns and Practices? SharePoint Patterns and Practices basically is the SharePoint developer community. The SharePoint PnP, or the PnP as a kind of a shortening, basically owns as an initiative everything what we do related on SharePoint development. Documentation, APIs, samples, open source projects, whatever Microsoft is actually coordinating together with you within a project. First, initially, this wasn't actually the case. SharePoint PnP was something slightly different. I'm going to touch that after a few slides. But then after a while, it was integrated as part of the Microsoft or SharePoint engineering. And now everything related on SharePoint development is getting coordinated by this initiative, which is actually driven and kind of executed together with MVPs and community, which has been working really, really well. Because obviously community and MVPs will tell us as a SharePoint, Microsoft employees what's out there actually in the real world, rather than people in Redmond trying to figure out and guess what is a customer. You meet customers every single day. It's not like I meet customers every single day. Well, maybe I'm an exception, but a lot of the Microsoft employees do not meet customers in every single day. You do, or you are the customer. So you can actually tell us what's important for you. Now, the SharePoint PnP really comes from the thinking behind of the initiative comes from a really simple idea. Why are we all the time starting from scratch? Why are we spending time on banging our head against the wall, trying to figure out basics before rather actually being able to be efficient and delivering value for the customers? Why wouldn't it be really cool if there would be a starting point, not necessarily uber academically correctly way of doing something, but a starting point of trying to build something, a starting point of having a reusable components, controls, which we can use within your solutions, and then start building your customer or your own personal development or ISV solutions on top of them. And that's where really this thinking is coming from, and that's where what the SharePoint PnP actually wants to give you. Everything what we do is MIT license. So you can use the open source projects directly using NPM packages or NuGet packages or from reference then in CDNs. If you do not like that, if the open source licensing and open source usage is not suitable for your company, it is MIT licensed. That means that you're able to pull it down, integrate it in that to your code base, and modify that any way you want. We do not care. It's all for you to use any way you want. We also release quite a lot of other assets like presentations, graphics, and all of that stuff. Everything is for you for free to use any way you want as part of this initiative. So because for me and for the thinking behind of the PnP, it's like, why wouldn't Microsoft actually give you all of the slides what we use? Because that will help you to deliver the exact same message as we do, rather than expecting you to build those slides from scratch or the graphics from scratch. That's stupid. Let's rather share what we built together so that other people can benefit out of it, and then we will be much more efficient together. as a Microsoft and as a community and as a partners and customers. Much more efficient as a community. So we provide reusable open source components and solutions and assets together with community. And this has been built together with SharePoint Engineering. It is a relatively long journey. I'm going to quickly touch that for those who are not actually part of this as well. So the SharePoint PnP journey actually starts from 2013. Which is actually kind of horrifying. It's 2019, and I've been basically doing this, well, not for living first, but nowadays for living now for six years. But it started with a simple idea when we and Bert Janssen, who's actually on the front row, we started thinking on, well, we were actually Microsoft consulting consultants, and we all the time saw that every single customer engagement started from scratch. Even though we built reusable components, reusable samples, reusable concepts and thinkings and patterns, people were not efficiently using those. So we started actually collecting samples, simple samples, not necessarily academically the right ways of doing something, rather concentrating on the way of, hey, making things happen. As a starting point, you could do X and Y and Z, you can do this, you can do that. And it's not necessarily using isolation, let's say, singleton patterns, or it's not necessarily using the right patterns or the really academically right patterns, but it's making things happen rather than concentrating on the really the academically right ways of doing stuff. And that evolved then to be, that came to be public. It was first an internal initiative, then it came to be public to Codeplex back in 2014. At that point, we needed to change the name. Actually, the original name was Gaps, which is kind of funny, because we were addressing gaps in the product documentations and in the sample. But we wouldn't be able to go live public with the name of gaps, because that would mean that Microsoft is not doing a good job. So we would point that there are gaps. So we needed to actually come up with something else. So initial name was actually Office Application Model Samples, so Office AMS. And then after a while, our marketing said that, well, you guys are actually doing quite a good job on sharing interesting stuff. So why wouldn't we change the name as Office 365 Patterns and Practices, which was the original name when we started then doing really stuff in a GitHub. A lot of stuff there, I know. Then in 2016, when actually SharePoint Framework was announced, at this moment I was already working inside of the SharePoint CAT team, which is a customer advisory team. But then in 2016, basically when SharePoint Framework was announced, there was a request from a relatively high level in the SharePoint organization that we would actually take the PnP initiative inside of the SharePoint engineering to make sure that the SharePoint Framework is landing properly. So that people are excited about the SharePoint Framework, and we are helping people to adapt the SharePoint Framework story. And that's basically how I got recruited then on the SharePoint SharePoint Engineering. But it's an interesting kind of initiative. It really started as two random guys collecting samples and writing documentations on Saturdays, Sundays, and evenings, because we actually had a day job. Nowadays, I'm lucky enough to actually execute this for a living, which is quite rare, and I understand that I'm in a really, really awesome position from that perspective. Now, it has grown a lot since 2016. We kind of started making this more mature and more official and all of that. It's now actually owning all of the SharePoint documentation, guidance, anything related on SharePoint development comes through basically the SharePoint PnP initiative. And we're trying to scale that to new directions as well. So we're trying to scale that to the design assets. As an example, if you're interested, Darcy Hess in the front row is trying to get that initiative moving of sharing design assets under the PnP umbrella. There's other kind of initiatives like Mark DeAnderson is now looking into doing more and driving kind of this from the IT pro documentation side. So using the same model on collecting documentation together with MVPs and field and sharing that for other ones in the community. Really, I think that the idea is really good. And we're trying to scale this as efficiently as possible. The new thing what we actually started doing in 2019 is also releasing services. And we do understand that if you're an ISV, this might be slightly horrifying. But what we're trying to do is show the right ways of actually implementing reusable services. And I'm going to demo one of them later in the session as well. But basically providing something which will be open source as well, where people can actually, as an example, provision modern portals really easily, and then you, as if you're an ISV, you can download the code, you can make it better, and you can provide service and SLA and all of the support on top of it. But we're kind of heading this more and more to the more professional way, a more professional direction with the PnP as well. We already right now have more than 500 samples in GitHub. There was more than 52,000 unique visitors within the past weeks in the GitHub, which gives you the scale of interest in the world domain. There's more than 1,000 contributors in GitHub for SharePoint PnP and the initiatives which are executed in here. That's insane. Well, in the scale of 6 years, it's kind of understandable maybe, but it still shows the interest of open source. We had more than 2.2 million watch time minutes in the SharePoint Dev YouTube channel for past 365 days. That's insane as well. And a lot of those demos are actually people, MVPs and community members doing live demos in our community calls, demonstrating a sample or demonstrating a pattern, which are then getting released in the YouTube channel, which is always beneficial for other ones to learn from as well. And there's more than 80,000 tenants in the world who've been using the open source components and controls. We do understand that there are companies who have policies that you're not allowed to use open source, and that's absolutely fine. But it's great to see the growing interest and the direction where the industry is going. Open source is the right way to do stuff. And Microsoft is promoting the open source thinking really, really heavily nowadays. I think we announced the Linux partnership and all of that in build, going further and all of that. So which is a good sign on the direction where we're heading together with community, together with open source people as well. Now, moving on things. So quickly, thank you, first of all of you. I see a lot of actually contributors in this audience. The program and initiative and the success we've been having on SharePoint development definitely would not have been possible without you helping us to succeed together. So thank you, everybody. And I want to actually do a quick clap on everybody on the room for that. Thank you. Good. Okay, so let's actually move on things. So in our PnP initiative, we kind of shared these things always on 3 different sections. And you might have seen this quite a few times in our community calls, but we talk about 3 different kind of main areas. It's learn, reuse, and share. Learn is around the fact that we provide documentation, guidance, videos, and all of that stuff. You're able to learn how to make things happen in the SharePoint world. Reuse is around the controls, components. We want to increase your productivity, so you will be more efficient as a developer, and you can make, you can be more successful in this journey of being a SharePoint or using the SharePoint as an extensibility platform. And then the sharing is when you have learned first how to do this, and then you're reusing some of the assets. Hopefully, you can actually share back. You can actually at least give us an issue reports and give us back reports around what you find on the reusable components, or even contribute back. Like I said, there's more than 1,000 contributors in these open source channels already in Microsoft. The simple way of contributing back actually, or sharing back, is if you find a typo in the documentation, there is actually an edit button on the top right corner, and that's it. You click the edit button, you fix the typo, submit, and done. And we had a typo fixed on the documentation. It is seriously as easy as that. And so it's really, really, and it's great to see that people are learning how to do that. What I wanted to quickly go through is some of the assets, so making sure that there are people, just out of curiosity, how many of you have never heard about PnP and SharePoint PnP and this developer assets? Nobody is kind of, no, I don't want to raise. This is actually a good sign. A lot of the people are aware of what we're actually doing. Really good. I want to quickly recap on the learning assets and what we actually have, so everybody is aware of these. Might be a recap for a lot of you as well. AKMS SP Dev blog, and this is our developer blog platform. We are releasing roughly 3 to 5 blog posts in a week. Quite often they are around SharePoint Dev Weekly, our weekly video magazine, or community calls, but also announcements and other related news related on SharePoint development is happening actually from here. Now, the next asset, I'm going to quickly show this in a second as well, is the documentation and guidance. So AKMS SP Dev Docs, that's going to redirect you to the docs.microsoft.com/SharePoint/dev URL, where you can find all of the documentation in SharePoint. MSDN does not exist anymore. It is gone. So all of the documentation has been redirected in this modern platform, which will support you to actually give us issues and open and contribute back on the documentation as well. Super important thing in our side. And obviously this contains documentation around SharePoint framework. It contains also documentation around SharePoint add-ins if you're still in on-prem or farm solutions. Everything is in one location. The third asset is our YouTube channel. Like I said, we had 2.2 million watch time minutes within the last year. We do not have advertisements, so we're not monetizing this platform at all, because obviously it's an official Microsoft YouTube channel, and we don't want to do that. But there's already more than 10,000 subscribers in here, so apparently people are liking the videos what we're releasing. So really, really cool stuff. And if there's something what is missing and you would like to have something, please let us know. We can provide that as a video and obviously as a documentation as well. And the final thing to call out is the samples and solutions. So github.com/SharePoint is the official SharePoint GitHub repository where we have a lot of our open source assets and samples. I'll show quickly these in a second as well. But then we have also an alternative GitHub repository. There's kind of a long-term way of thinking here, which is github.com/PnP, where we have more open source and community-driven projects. And most likely we'll relocate some of the repositories and samples from the github.com SharePoint to the github.com PnP relatively soon. That overall plan has been, well, we've been planning that for a while, and we'll make that happen quite soon as well. Now, let me do a quick assets. I'll just quickly, briefly go through all of those things so you are absolutely aware what's actually available. So SharePoint Dev Blog, that was AKMS SP Dev Blog. And you can actually find, for example, the latest announcements earlier this week, actually from yesterday, related on the updates and capabilities for developers in the SharePoint conference. You are able to subscribe all of this as a RSS feed, so you will know exactly when there's a new information available in the blog post as well. And like I said, we have like 3 to 5 new blog posts in a week, so there's quite a lot of actually activities here. But we kind of considered this as a way of rather have more activities than no activities, because no activities would mean that nothing is happening. So we're trying to share as much as possible videos and guidance and news related on here. One thing what I want to call out, which we're going to call out during the presentation as well today, there's, for example, information around the new Office 365 program benefits, which includes automatically renewing Office 365 tenant as long as you're using that for developer usage. So good example of a really, really important news announcement which you don't want to miss, because you don't need to pay as long as you're a developer around your Office 365 developer tenants. Really, really important thing. Now, the second thing what we mentioned was the SharePoint developer documentation, really awesome resource as well. And in here, for example, on SharePoint framework, we have all of the getting started guidance, step-by-step guidance on getting started on SharePoint framework. Now, if there is any typos or issues around the documentation, I kind of noted this one already, you can just go here, click edit button, and that's actually pretty much all what's needed. And then you're able to start editing and submit a pull request towards the GitHub. It is as easy as that. And we do welcome contributions and fixes, which might be as small as one letter to a scale of paragraphs or an articles. Everything is more than welcome. Then the third resource actually was the SharePoint Developer YouTube channel. Quite a lot of videos, quite a lot of stuff happening here. A few things to call out potentially. Getting started with SharePoint Framework training videos. Andrew Connell is actually we use Andrew Connell to create these videos, and there's a training package behind of it as well. It is now 12 videos and 12 modules, and we're providing also presentations, hands-on labs, demo material. So if you're looking into the redelivering this package for somebody else, you can easily do that as well. And then use AC's recording as the reference on how would I deliver this in practice for my own students. So really, really great resource as well. And then obviously the GitHub, github.com/SharePoint, a lot of repositories, a lot of capabilities, which are going to happen in here, and what's available in the locations. But quickly calling out SPDevFX web parts as an example, massive amount of sample web parts which are available for you to learn how to implement extensibility in SharePoint framework. This is a huge list of samples, and as an example, let me go here. There we go, craft reports. Tomorrow morning we have a next SharePoint Framework community call where the writer of this sample is going to demonstrate how he created this really awesome looking SPFX whipboard, which is then using Graph.js and Graph APIs to draw dynamic data. Everything open source, everything MIT licensed. You can download this, you can repackage that and deploy that to your solution or to your deployment and take advantage of that. Or if you're an ISV, you can take advantage of the code and then you're able to rebuild that as, or enhance that to your own usage as well. Really, really cool stuff. Some of the samples are really complex. Some of the samples are much more simple overall. So they show you how to get started on the SharePoint framework side. Good. Moving back in here, so before we go to the demos and more, let's say, cooler demos, so to say, and a few announcements as well. So let's move to the reuse section. And the reuse section is really around us covering what do we actually do and what are the assets which you can take advantage to be more successful in your work. And we have some new stuff available here as well. And there's some new announcements which we're going to do today. First of all, kind of a classic slide. And this just demonstrates the amount of stuff that we actually do within the SharePoint PnP and Dev ecosystem. These are all different open source projects or assets or stuff which is available for you. So after a few years ago, we already decided that in these introduction sessions, there's no way for us covering all of this because it would get really messy and really, really complex to actually run through all of these things. But there's the provisioning service, there's the provisioning engine, SharePoint Starter Kit, there's the Office 365 CLI, PnP CSOM. There's a massive amount of stuff. But in this session, again, I wanted to raise, I think, 3 main topics or 3 new things from the section of what we do. And so you'll know about, again, some new assets which you can take advantage within your work starting already today, which is super important as well. So this is not something which is a future promise. All of this stuff is available in GitHub as a reusable asset for you already today. Now, let's talk about the provisioning engine slightly. How many of you have used the PnP provisioning engine in the last 5 years, so to say? Quite a few people. Okay, I'm going to show and half. So I'm going to show actually what does it mean in practice, but I'm going to show that with a new twist, which is relatively new, related on PnP templates, and we're going to show how you can take advantage of all of this in your projects. But the PnP provisioning engine really is something which is actually even the grandpa for site designs and site scripts, because site designs and site scripts are actually designed based on ideas from the PnP provisioning engine. And this PnP provisioning engine actually starts from an idea from 2012. It is now 2019, so it's pretty horrifying how time flies. But it really started as a simple idea as part of the master certification program, SharePoint master certification program for SharePoint training, where I was an instructor for 18 rotation between 2008 and 2012 or 13, when the program unfortunately was shut down. But as part of this journey from SharePoint 2007 to 2013 or 2016 and so on, my responsibility was all about provisioning. And my responsibility of knowing what is a site design, web templates, feature XMLs, and trust me, you can have a question which I cannot answer on those because I've really studied those really closely. But there was massive amount of challenges around the feature framework structure. Some of you may remember tooling like Fabulous 40, which, by the way, my manager has said for me, do not use the Fabulous 40 term when you're talking about the new provisioning, but I just did. So I do apologize, Ed. Now, Fabulous 40 was a great idea. It was a great idea of actually releasing 37 templates, which is actually slightly weird. It was a Fabulous 40, but we released 37 templates for you to take advantage within your SharePoint on-premises. The problem of Fabulous 40 was that it was custom site definitions and web site templates, which are not future-proven ways of customizing SharePoint. They are not actually ways you should be anymore using SharePoint or provisioning anything new within a SharePoint deployment. So already in 2012, we started thinking on how else can we actually make this happen? And the solution came as part of the SharePoint 2013, when we initially were able to do something with a proper remote APIs. The problem with site definitions and web templates and site templates is actually the fact that they have a dependency on XMLs. They have a dependency on files which has to exist in a site collection or in the farm solution or in the farm servers. But when you're using a remote provisioning model, you're just modifying like the user could be modifying by clicking the browser. So there's no dependencies on any external resources, or like the XML files in a sandbox solutions or in a farm solutions. And as part of this journey, when we started thinking this, and it's been a long journey, it really came to the conclusion, well, not a conclusion yet, but as a really kind of now it's almost looking like the initial vision, as part of the journey related on SharePoint provisioning service. How many of you saw the demo in the dev keynote yesterday on this one? Half of the room. Or then other ones are just too lazy to wave their hands, which is fine as well. Now, I want to do a quick demo on the SharePoint provisioning service, and then we're going to do something cool related on that one as well. So let me actually, and I accidentally apparently closed that one, so let me flip here to my demo tenant, and let me go to the lookbook first and show you this one. So obviously the SharePoint lookbook, you should have been aware of this one, something we announced in 2018 Ignite. Awesome resource, awesome set of resources related on how you can build and how you can build cool looking modern sites. As part of this journey of building this and adapting the modern sites and having the lookbook designs, the constant feedback what we were having is that, well, it's nice to have pictures, but how can I actually get that one to my tenant? And that's where we actually started then building the provisioning service and the provisioning the SharePoint PnP.com, which is a multi-tenant Azure AD application, which can be used by tenant administrator to provision any of these templates to your tenant. So I can select any of the templates. Let's do something else than what we did on the keynote. Let's use the brand template as an example. I can check what the brand template is all about, what does it contain, and then I can actually click add to your tenant. It's going to do an authorization. In my case, I've already authorized this solution, so it goes to the Azure AD, which is in a slow mode today, and then it moves back on my application. And then I can actually provide the needed attributes. So I can say, let's say, brand SPC as the URL, and it's validating the site URL, making sure that is it free or not. You can actually apply on top of existing sites as well. But there might be complications on that. I'm not going to touch too much on that one. Now we're going to use a new site collection, and then it's nothing more than clicking the provision. It's going to do a validation of the URL, validation of the tenant, validating prerequisites, and then it basically starts the provisioning of the template to the tenant which I was signed in. So there's the confirmation. It explains what's going to be provisioned and what is the timeline. We're being quite, let's say, pessimistic on the estimates. So in here we're saying 5 minutes, but actually it will be to 1.5 minutes roughly, so 90 seconds for this particular template as well. So now the request has been done, the template starts moving, and there's a Azure service which is now connecting to the tenant and provisioning a new site collection, getting cool stuff available for them. Now, this service is actually, we built the service in a way that if you go to the service description and you start thinking that, well, I don't want to use the service, but can I actually use the templates? And the answer is actually you can. So all of these templates are open sourced. Let me slightly adjust the font and click to dismiss. Are open sourced in a github.com and SP dev provisioning templates. So all of the templates which you saw in the provisioning service are available for you to take advantage from a source perspective as well. So we're able to start with them and modify the content of those templates and use them by yourself for your personal usage. Or if you prefer to use code or PnP PowerShell to apply these templates to your tenant, yep, that works as well. Because you can just go to the tenant folder in GitHub. You'll actually see, as an example, the give@contoso template is here. That is what we actually were seeing in the UI as the give template. Did we use give? No, we didn't actually use give template. We use, which one did I select? Brand. Pay attention, Vesa. Yes, I do. Am I talking to myself? Yes, I am. Am I in a stage in front of people talking to myself? Yes, you are. Cool. So this is the template what I selected, and basically we can see that this is exactly the page which is visible in the provisioning service. So how this thing actually works is that when you go and what you see in the service is actually backed by that particular GitHub repository. So we're using the GitHub repository. This page, which you can see here, is actually this README file from the GitHub. So using the GitHub as the content delivery location and the content modification location as well. And in here, as said, you can actually find the XML structures, the template structures, and all of that, and you're able to download this and modify the templates any way you want as well. Now, It's a relatively cool system. So how we built the system is that it's actually, we're taking, like I said, we are reading this GitHub repository. We are then taking all of these assets, pushing them to the Azure storage blob, and then we're exposing that information in the provisioning service, and then operating against the tenant we're signed in. And one of the asks, what we all the time are getting, that, well, wouldn't it be really cool if this functionality and if this service would be open source for anybody else to take advantage as well? Because if you're an ISV or if you're building enterprise solutions, you want to offer this service only for one enterprise or only for one customer as a starting point. And answer is, we're going to go open source right now, live on stage. So let's see. It's not yet, but it's going to be there in 2 minutes. I'm going to wait for, I saw David at least take a photo. But we're basically now going open source with this service, and we're going to give you documentation on how you can take this service and host it to your customer as well. So if you're a system integrator and you want to host similar service to your, let's say, enterprise customer, we'll give you documentation and guidance as a starting point. What we actually done here is that this particular solution is a multi-tenant solution operating in Azure AD, but you can adjust that to be specific for one customer based on this source code, which is now actually available. Now, well, to be fair, it's not yet available, so let's actually make that available live on stage, because that's more interesting always. So let me go to the SharePoint root, and let me go to the SP provisioning service, which was the URL, and just for the sake of it, we're going to do this live in SPC. So let me go in here. I'm going to copy the name of the repository because I know what I need to do. And then I scroll down and say, make this repository public. And here we go. And now it is open sourced as long as I confirm my password. 1, 2, 3, and we're done. Woohoo! Now it's available in internet. Thank you. Now, as always with these things, there's a source code is now available, and there is an example web config files there. There's some content and structures there. You can have a look on how it actually is being built and how does it operate. It works in a way that it actually reads that data from GitHub and then exposes that using a website in Azure. And we'll definitely provide more guidance and architectural videos and documentation on this. So I do apologize once again, we're running behind of the train, so to say, that the documentation isn't really optimal. But having already the source code available will probably is beneficial for you to understand how the system actually works. Good. Now, we were actually creating the template. What did we use? We used the give template. So let's make sure that we actually got that. So let me actually go, where was it? Here we go. So it was a brand SPC. No, it was a brand template which I used. And this one was the template and the output of the template which was provided and applied. Things to notice here, this actually is using the most recent version of the PnP provisioning, which supports section background pages. It supports a lot of other settings and configurations on the pages, so we can actually get the page look really much in line like it is in the SharePoint lookbook designs. And really one of the key, let's say, objectives on the whole service was the initial request actually from Jeff Deeper, which started at some point was that, hey, we really need to focus on having a proper templates on modern portals so that whenever there's a consultant who needs to do pre-sales consulting for a customer, they can go to one location and they can say provision, 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 voila, and then I can go to customer tomorrow and start playing around and showing how cool stuff you can actually build with modern SharePoint. Now, anybody can do this in any tenant in the world, or you can theoretically at least use this as a starting point for your intranet designs as well. We technically are slightly hesitant with that statement because there's some sample content there, and it's always then you have to start cleaning the content away. But if nothing else, they will give you an idea what's possible. And sure, you can clean the content away if you want to use them as a starting point for some of the structures for your tenant, for your deployment. Good. That's pretty cool. So that's now open source and out. It was a quite big bureaucracy process of getting that process out. We talked about this one in MVP Summit for MVPs already, and it's always, even though Microsoft is really pro open source, but we need to get rid of the bureaucracy on making sure that all of this stuff is done properly. Now, moving on things, I wanted to pinpoint some of the roadmap points around the service, so we will keep on evolving the service as well. Right now, we're looking into adding the multilingual supports for sites which are provisioned. So the service itself probably will be in English because we haven't really have requests of the UI of the service to be multilingual, but you are able to then select from a drop-down that the target site which is getting created would be created, for example, in Finnish or Sweden or French or Russian or whatever. So you're able to provision multilingual sites on other side. Improve tenant pre-validation, so validation of checks, making sure that the flow is working even more efficiently. Performance improvements, we want to make this happen as fast as possible. And then support for granular permission requirements, which basically means you do no longer necessarily need to be a tenant administrator to be able to use the service. As long as the template which was selected is simple enough, we're able to apply that on top of any site in the tenant. So the site collection administrator permissions would be enough. So all of this is coming, I would say, by Ignite, or that's now the plan, gradually as we move along on this journey. It is still in beta or in public preview as well. We're kind of taking the Google approach with this service, so putting the beta marker on the site for a while until we are 100% sure that it's reliable enough and it's more performant enough, and then we just get rid of the beta marker on the site as well. Cool. Maybe one thing which probably I shouldn't be saying at this point, my manager is probably back row somewhere saying, mute, Vesa, mute, mute. Now, in a long run, it might be that this will be evolving to be more natively part of the tenants and more natively part of the admin UIs on the tenant as well. It really depends on the usage and interests around this kind of a service. And so it might be at some point, it might be a tenant administrator UI, where you go and you're able to just simply provision example content to your tenant. We'll see. I'm not promising anything, but it's an interesting discussions what we're having internally, where this service could go in matter of a year or two. We'll see what will actually happen. Really depends on the usage of the service as well. Good. Announcing something more. What am I announcing? What was on the slide? Actually, I do remember that. So, one of the cool things, what we're also announcing, this actually technically was out a few weeks before the SPC, but we now have a Microsoft Teams and Azure AD user support for our tenant templates as well. Maybe the Azure AD user support isn't that interesting for you, but the Microsoft Teams support is. So what it means is that you're able to create a PnP tenant template where you actually define that I want to provision 3 site collections. One of them is a hub site, one of them 3 site designs, site scripts, themes which are applied on those site collections. And then I want to create team structures and channels and tabs pointing back on the SharePoint inside of the template. And whenever you apply the template to any tenant, you'll get all of that automatically created based on your configuration. So you can really easily create demo structures, you can really easily create customer deployments in a reusable way using the tenant templating techniques. And I'm going to show this one in practice in the following slides. So let's actually jump on this demo. Good. Not that one, it's in here. So I'm going to use Visual Studio Code. I'm a big fan of using Visual Studio Code even in PowerShell usage. But if you're not familiar with that, let me actually flip here. Where did you go? Here we go. Not that one. KT. Come on. If I do it in here, I can then do PowerShell ICE. I'm a really big fan of Visual Studio Code. It is just absolutely brilliant. But now what I actually have here is a tenant template, and this tenant template is relatively complex. I'm going to walk through this one in a second, but let's first see what's actually available. So this is something which Paolo, who is one of the engineers or MVPs actively working within the engine, has created for testing purposes, and I'm showing this one in practice. Generate a human being. That's actually probably me writing those things at some point. Anyway, But what I'm going to actually quickly show here, I'm going to do this side by side. I have a template there which is provisioning tenant structures in this deployment. So we have here, let me actually flip here, I'm just going to refresh this. We have a relatively simple tenant which only have 2 different teams right now available. And what I'm going to use is that I'm going to use PnP PowerShell to simplify process. Slightly going to adjust the font in here. Let me actually do it this way. Here we go. We're interested in what actually happens over there. And I'm going to show you what the template is looking like. I should be actually already connected in here. Let's see, am I connected? Unless I'm completely mistaken. There we go, I'm already connected to the tenant, so I don't need to run the connection. And I'm using PnP PowerShell, which is really widely used PowerShell module with more than 500 commandlets, unless I'm completely mistaken. I'm watching Irvin's, not yet, 450. 400, okay, fine. 400, 500, yeah, it doesn't really matter. Hundreds of commandlets. So. And all open source or community contributed as well. But what I'm going to do here, I'm going to apply a PnP tenant template, provisioning teams. This is just the XML file, is the tenant template. And this tenant template is relatively simple. It only has the tenant team structure. But what's on the team side? So we're applying the template now using PowerShell. You could do this in an Azure using code as well. You could do automate this one using alternative ways as well in Azure using PowerShell or using C#. But you can see now one team actually was created on teams, and there's one channel in that team, and the other team is coming there. 1, 2, 3, 4. How about now? Come on. There we go. There's the provisioning teams number 2. So we're basically automating the team's creation. And sure, the engine behind of the scenes is using Microsoft Teams Graph API, because that's the API how to create Microsoft Teams. But what's the key point here is that you can have one template which is containing site collections, branding, definitions, users even, and team structures. And then with the one command, one line of code, you can actually create all of those things in a reliable way to any tenant in the world. And that's actually pretty cool. So it's not just about SharePoint, it's also about including those team structures. And this actually works in a level of really nice. So I'm actually going to increase the font. How is the time flying this fast? It's just insane. So here, if I go to this channel, we have even pointers to wiki pages. There's additional tabs. We're pointing back on a SharePoint, on a shared documents, which can be created as part of the template. We can absolutely create any other structures here as well. Where was it actually? Is it actually? Yes, here we go. You can create tabs which are pointing to a website, and you can do any other customizations in those tabs as well. So you're able to relatively easily do templates which are able to stamp to any tenant in the world. Really quickly showing the structure. We will have more documentation, and we actually have even demos on this one from the community course. There is a JSON way of doing that, which is the JSON template in the Microsoft Teams. I'm going to briefly increase the font for row people. This is the graph way of doing stuff. You can do that, or you can do also just the structural XML way of doing things. If you do the XML way of doing things, you actually do have then intelligence. So there's an XSD which you can actually use. So when you're writing the structures, you're able to do that. Right now, the tooling does not yet support extracting an existing team structure from existing tenant, but that's in the pipeline and the roadmap as well. But this way, you can always get exactly the same end result when you want to create theme structures in any tenant in the world. Is that cool? Yes. Thank you. Cool. Let me get back in here. Time flies when you're having fun. Hanging with friends, right? So time flies so fast. I would be able to talk about all of this stuff like ages and hours and hours and hours, because so cool. One of the things what we wanted to pinpoint, and this we know that we're pinpointing the transformation tooling a lot, but there's a reason for it. We as in Microsoft, we are investing currently only to modern experiences in SharePoint. So we want to help people move from the classic experiences. And Mark D. Anderson, don't quote me wrong on that one in Twitter. Just kidding. No, just sorry. Yeah, sorry, just making fun of him. So the transformation is super important because we are investing only on the modern experiences. So we want people to move away from classic. The classic SharePoint was introduced back in 2013. It is 2019. It was basically designed and implemented back in 2011 roughly, because at the time it was the time 3 years release cycle timeline for the products. So it's almost 10 years old, a decade old technology, what people are using as a publishing sites or classic theme sites. We want people to move to the modern, so we're able to invest more and more as a Microsoft also on modern, because more people move there, then we can balance out our investments more on the modern side. The classic publishing, classic page are still supported in SharePoint Online, absolutely. We're not going to shut down them, but we want people to move to modern for all of the new capabilities. And let me quickly do a relatively quick demo on this one. Sorry, it went to the wrong direction. How things actually can be transformed. This is quite a quick demo. I'm going to show quickly this. It is actually in a different desktop, so let me jump in here. This is a classic theme site. This is, again, open source tooling, which is available for you to take advantage anytime. We are also actively looking into making this stuff more closely part of the product, but the technology is already available for you to take advantage of the stuff. So this is a classic theme site. It has if I scroll down, it has a custom user custom action, something embedded on the page. It has a custom theme. There's some pages. There's different kind of content available. I can go to the drone editions. We can see that there's a JS link or CDR client side rendering. Actually, let me go to the classic SharePoint so we can see that. So there's a client-side rendering of that field. So we're basically rendering that field value using the color, and you can see the font, the footer here as well. Now, transforming this one using the transformation tooling is relatively fast. Transformation tooling does one-by-one pages. You can do an in-place transformation, or you can also do a cross-site collection transformation if you're working and transforming publishing pages, and that's really cool as well. So we're able to transform from a publishing page in a one site collection to a communication site in another site collection URL. And then changing nowadays, we announced the URL announcements, right? So we're able to basically then fall back to another site collection to the original URL, and poof, then we're good to go. Now, transforming this one, I'm talking too much. Let me actually fire the PowerShell commandlet for this one. We tested this earlier today, so it's working properly. I'm going to just quickly do modernize. I'm not going to modernize. PowerShell, it's going to ask me some questions. Yes, we're going to run that. The input URL of the sites to be modernized. All of these assets obviously are available for you, and we have documentation available how to take advantage of that. Input of the group alias for the site. So we're actually group associating the modern site as well. So we're modernizing the whole site. So it comes to be a modern group associated site. So let's call this modernize me 02. So it's unique. And then do we want it to be public or false? It doesn't really matter. Classification label, I don't have any, so I don't care. It's now connecting to the tenant, and it actually starts operating within a site. Now, we are providing all of these PowerShells. We are providing all of this tooling available. I can briefly maybe show here what the PowerShell, briefly explaining what the PowerShell is doing for that particular site collection. It is enabling, it's double checking first of all the types of the sites which is supported. So this one right now, this exact PowerShell doesn't support, for example, publishing sites. Then it's enabling those needed features which are making that classic site to be modern theme site. So basically enabling modern page features, enabling other features on the site, and disabling some of the features as well. It's installing, in this case, also a custom SPFX application because we had that custom footer. So we basically, in this case, the customer has a customization in Classic, and we want to enable the similar matching customization in the Modern. So we're adding a customization or installing the SPFX solution there as well. Scrolling down of things, we're getting rid of any master pages, custom master pages, because custom master pages are not supported in modern site. You can modernize and provide branding in alternative ways, but there will never be support for custom master pages in modern SharePoint. That will never happen. And then we are cleaning up other things. We're applying a custom theme for it and doing other settings as well. So let's see. The transformation is completed. Let me go back on the page. Now it's a classic page still because I haven't refreshed this. Clicking me home. We can actually see that it's a modern SharePoint page. Not a massive amount of change from a end user perspective, which is actually good because then the change management from an end user perspective is not huge. But if I click edit, we can actually see that we have sections, we have the modern web parts, everything has been replaced from classics to modern, and now we're running in the modern experience. Is that cool? And maybe one thing here quickly to pinpoint as well. So if I go back on the, where do we have the Drone editions? Now I'm still in the classic experience because this is the classic experience. I went to the classic, so it put a cookie on my browser. And now if I click to exit the classic experience, we can actually see that even in modern experiences, we can render the color codes properly for the field being rendered. And by the way, this example is here. It is documented precisely in our documentation, migrating from JS Link to SharePoint Framework extension. And there's basically walking through exactly the same story. From a classic JS Link to the modern extensibility is in the documentation. The documentation has a massive amount of good content available for you. One point, maybe just the final topic in here. Now that it is a group-associated team site, check what's available here as well, which should be clarifying things from an end-user perspective. So we're able to also teamify then the group-associated team site. So now from a classic experience, we groupified it, and now we can teamify the site, so it's running the latest and greatest experiences in online. So it's pretty cool. Good. Where is my desktops? It is actually in here. So let's actually do a few other things. So we have so much stuff on the SharePoint PnP for you to take advantage. There's massive amount of content, massive amount of open source projects. There's multiple MVPs who are executing multiple different projects under the PnP umbrella. These are some of the 6 things which are just raised here, which are actively being worked on, which we didn't precisely demo today, except maybe PnP PowerShell we touched, but then again, it has more than 400 commandlets to modify and do scripting towards SharePoint Online. There's the PnP reusable controls available, property panes, React controls. There's the PnP JS library. Usage is growing rapidly. It helps people to do JavaScript-based customizations in SharePoint. The usage is just out of roof of that one. PnP SPFX Yeoman. It's an open source extensibility, open source Yeoman generator, which is extending the out-of-the-box Yeoman generator. And yesterday we announced that the out-of-the-box Yeoman generator will go open source sooner or later, and at that point we'll merge these two together, and most likely we'll see what's going to happen with there. The designs are not yet locked down. Office 365 CLI, if you're looking into doing cross operating system management of your tenants, Office 365 CLI is there. That actually started as a let's say a grassroots effort because we had a guy in the PnP, closed PnP group, Waldek Mastercards, who's running a Mac, and he can't manage Office 365 CDN using PowerShell because PowerShell doesn't work on Mac. So he needed to build something, and that started the whole Office 365 CLI project. Now it has more than 100 commands as well. And then obviously SharePoint StarterKit is now running 1.8.2 version. It has been relatively recently upgraded to the latest version, and we keep on evolving that as well on the side of everything else. So a lot of assets, a lot of other stuff which you can take advantage in your own projects starting today. All of this is available. So, and open sourced, so you're able to use it any way you want. Good. Quick kind of a SharePoint. This will kind of go nicely on the line from the timing. So why would you share, and what's the benefit of sharing in all of this stuff? So why share back to the community? Obviously, we keep everything as open source, an MIT license. We don't really care, but we do value those people who contribute back. We are not requiring that, and it's absolutely fine. Just use the assets. We understand that you have a business to run, and you have a day job, and you have family. Family is the number one and the most important thing in life, at least for me. And in the PnP group, we always say that family first. But then, if you have availability, if you have interest and you can contribute back, you will get personally acknowledged in the official communications. So that's a minimal thing we can do. We can actually call you out in our monthly summary saying that thank you David Warner as an example, who's been really active contributor on the PnP. Thank you for being part of this. Thank you for helping us up on this journey and making sure that other people understand the value of what we're doing. You can share back to the people you helped, who helped you to learn on this journey. Some of the people don't care about that stuff, and that's absolutely fine as well. For me, it's really important to go back and say thank you, and then contribute back. The contributions are visible in GitHub. They're visible in docs.microsoft.com. They're visible in a user profile in GitHub, so you actually officially get acknowledged on all of this stuff. And so when you are applying a new job, actually quite many companies are nowadays watching these things. Are you active in the community? Because that's a positive thing, right? Because we are heading to the open source more and more as an industry. And really the last point there, to be honest, I was unable to get a third point, but sharing is caring. It's the classical slogan of PnP, because really if you want other people to feel good as well, sharing your knowledge back on them definitely helps. Again, not mandatory thing, but we do ask people to do that. If you can, we absolutely appreciate people to do that. These are the companies who have contributed or which we have logos, a permission to use their logos in our communications, who have employees who have contributed on the open source initiative during this year. This is also something what we do in our official communications on a monthly basis. So we call out those companies who we have a permission to actually show the logo. A lot of famous companies, a lot of smaller companies as well, but a lot of companies who actually give their employees the opportunity of working with the community, even partly on working hours. Because those companies benefit out of the open source community assets, so they want to give back for the other people in the community. And then we can build better and better solutions together. Really important thing. A lot of companies, I'm not going to mention all of these. And I do apologize if I missed somebody's company and you've contributed and give me permissions. I do apologize, that's on me. I try to find all of the logos for this year for companies who have contributed. Now, just to summarize this one, because we are running out of time and I don't want to do extra time, so learn, reuse, share. One address to remember, if you don't remember all of the AKMS SP Dev docs and assets and issues and videos, AKMS SP PnP, there's an assets and links to everything what we do. We do have weekly community calls, bi-weekly SharePoint Framework community calls, bi-weekly SharePoint Dev Generic community calls on every single Thursday, 7 a.m. Pacific. We do understand that it might be problematic if you are in Pacific time zone. Maybe it's not problematic, maybe it's a good thing, because then you can actually take the call before you start going to the job. Who knows? We're trying to adjust this as much as possible in a global scale as well, which is a massive challenge. I've been trying to rooting for and voting and pushing for one single time zone globally, but people are not catching this. I don't know what's wrong with that. That would solve all of these things. Just let's agree that it's a Pacific time zone across the world. But build SharePoint Framework web parts and extensions, definitely the right thing to do. The modern SharePoint, you can actually build those things for SharePoint Framework solutions, also for SharePoint 2016, SharePoint 2019. Really, SharePoint Online, the modern experience is #1 thing. Use patterns and practices, give out asset backs, give out feedback, but explore the options, so you don't have to start from scratch. You can start from something what people have built already. Integrate with Microsoft Teams and other assets which are available. And really good reminder, once again, sign up for the Office 365 Dev Program or the Office Dev Program. You will get a free tenant which will renew automatically as long as you use it for developer usage. What does it mean? Well, it means that you deployed SPFX packages in App Catalog, you use or hit REST APIs or Graph APIs, then it's being validated as it's in developer usage, we're going to renew this automatically. What's good about that tenant also is that there's 25 accounts. So you can actually build scenarios and test cases where somebody is an administrator, somebody is not administrator, does it work or not? The reason for the telemetry and inspection obviously is that otherwise if we wouldn't make the inspection and telemetry around is it used for development, people would use that tenant for their business. So we need to be relatively strict on that automation. We've seen that actually happen, so that's why we needed to change some processes in here. But that's all pretty much what I'm going to do today. Just quickly recapping, there's a lot of sessions coming up, Microsoft developer sessions coming up. I don't think there's no point right now mentioning all of these. Right now, in 45 minutes in this room, Luca Bandinelli Luca is going to talk about SharePoint Framework with John, if I remember correctly. In 45 minutes in this room. You can go and fill up, get a coffee in that 45 minutes. And there's a lot of other great sessions coming up later this day as well. And not forgetting about tomorrow. And there's a lot of good, great community assets and community sessions coming up as well during today and tomorrow. But thank you, everybody, and thank you for being part of the community. Thank you for being part of this together.